They say secrets have a way of coming out, no matter how deeply you bury them. For me, Lillian, a respected lawyer and the wife of a judge, it wasn't just the secret, it was who I was hiding it from that made it unbearable. It started on a Monday morning, the kind that drags you from the bed with grudging determination. I was late for court, my mind racing through the details of a high-profile defense case that had the whole city buzzing. I had to win. Losing wasn't just a blow to my career, it would tarnish everything I had built over the years. As I walked into the courtroom, there he was, Henry, my husband's son from his first marriage. Henry, the young prosecutor everyone admired. Henry, the one man I had no business looking at the way I did. He didn't notice me at first, but when his eyes met mine, it felt like the ground shifted beneath my feet. This wasn't the first time, there had been moments before, stolen glances across the dinner table, a brush of hands that lingered too long, conversations that felt too personal. But seeing him now, in that courtroom, standing against me in a case that could end my career, it was like the universe was testing my self-control, daring me to do something reckless. And then it happened. As we traded arguments before the judge, I caught a flicker of something in his expression, a crack in his carefully polished armor. He wasn't just arguing the case, he was wrestling with something else, something deeper. I knew that look because I had seen it in the mirror. By the time the session ended, I was a mess of nerves. My husband, oblivious as ever, was at home calling to check on my progress. I answered with the usual calm, reassuring him that everything was under control, but everything was far from fine. Later that evening, I found myself sitting in my car outside Henry's apartment. The rain poured heavily, blurring the world outside, but inside, my thoughts were sharp and unforgiving. What was I doing here? What was I looking for? Just as I was about to start the car and leave, the door to his apartment opened. Henry stepped out, his umbrella shielding him from the rain. He froze when he saw my car, his face a mix of surprise and something I couldn't quite name. "Lillian," he said, coming closer. His voice was calm, but his eyes told another story. "What are you doing here?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. My heart was pounding in my chest, loud enough to drown out the sound of the rain. I shouldn't have been there, but at that moment, I didn't want to be anywhere else. For a moment, all I could hear was the rain, the steady drumming on the roof of the car. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, but my resolve was slipping. Henry stood just outside the door, his umbrella tilted to shield him. His expression was unreadable. The words tangled in my throat. What was I even doing? I was supposed to be a woman of principle, a respected lawyer, a wife. But here I was, sitting outside my stepson's apartment in the rain, like a character in one of those movies I always rolled my eyes at. "Lillian," he said again, softer this time. His voice carried something I couldn't place. Concern, curiosity, or maybe something else entirely, something neither of us wanted to name. "I needed some air," I finally said, knowing how weak it sounded. "In front of my house?" he asked, one eyebrow arched. A hint of a smile played on his lips, but his eyes stayed serious. He was too sharp for his own good, just like his father. I looked away, my gaze falling on the rain-soaked streets. "It's nothing. I'll go," but I didn't. Instead, I just sat there, gripping the wheel as if it could anchor me to something solid. I felt him hesitate, then step closer. He bent slightly, tapping on the window. "Come inside," he said. "You shouldn't be out here like this." It was an invitation I should have refused. I knew that, but the tension between us was like a string pulled tight, and I didn't have the strength to walk away. Inside his apartment, it was warm and orderly, a surprising contrast to the chaos in my mind. The faint scent of coffee lingered in the air, and books were scattered across the table. It struck me, not for the first time, how different he was from his father, less rigid, more alive. "Tea or coffee?" he asked, already moving to the kitchen. "Tea," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I sat on the edge of the couch, my hands folded neatly in my lap, trying to project calm, but my heart was racing. He returned with 2 mugs, setting one in front of me before taking the chair across from me. The silence stretched heavy and unbearable. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the tension, but I couldn't trust myself. "Lillian," he said finally, his tone cautious. Is everything okay? I laughed softly, a bitter sound. Do I look like someone who has everything under control? He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. No, you don't. But I want to understand. And just like that, the dam broke. I told him about the case, about the pressure I was under, about the whispers in the courtroom and the scrutiny of the press. I told him how I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, and how sometimes I just wanted to let it all fall. He listened, his eyes never leaving mine, and when I finally stopped, he leaned back, running a hand through his hair. You don't have to do it alone, you know. I don't have a choice, I said, shaking my head. Yes, you do, he replied, his voice firm. You just don't see it yet. I looked at him, then, really looked at him, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade. It was dangerous, this thing between us, but it felt as though we were standing at the edge of something neither of us could name. The weight of his words hung in the air. I stared into my tea, the steam curling up like a fragile thread connecting me to reality. Henry was right. I had choices, but some choices carried consequences I wasn't ready to face. Henry, I said softly, looking up at him. His eyes met mine, steady and searching. This, whatever it is, it's dangerous. You know that, don't you? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked to the window, his back to me, watching the rain streak down the glass. I know, he said finally. But that doesn't make it any less real. My chest tightened at his words, and I stood, suddenly restless. It can't happen, I said, more to myself than to him. It's wrong. Your father. He turned sharply, cutting me off. My father doesn't see you, Lillian. Not the way I do, not the way you deserve to be seen. The truth of his words hit me like a blow. My marriage to his father had long become a partnership of convenience, two ambitious people sharing a life but rarely connecting on anything deeper. But admitting that, even to myself, felt like betrayal. This is madness, I said, shaking my head. Maybe it is, he replied, stepping closer. But it doesn't change how I feel, and I don't think it changes how you feel, either. I couldn't breathe. The room felt too small, the walls pressing in on me. I needed to leave, to escape before I did something I couldn't undo. I should go, I said, reaching for my bag. He didn't stop me, but his voice followed me to the door. You deserve to be happy, Lillian. Don't forget that. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle as I stepped outside. I stood there for a moment, letting the cool drops fall on my face, grounding me, driving home my racing mind. How had I let things get so out of control? How had I, Lillian, a woman known for her discipline and integrity, found myself teetering on the edge of disaster? That night, lying awake beside my husband, I thought about Henry's words, you deserve to be happy. The truth was, I didn't know what happiness looked like anymore. I had spent so much time chasing success, maintaining appearances, and fulfilling obligations, that I had forgotten how to just be. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living this double life, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to face it with honesty, no matter how hard it was. I stepped into the courtroom with a renewed sense of purpose. The case was still looming, and Henry was still on the other side, but something had shifted in me. I wasn't just fighting to win, I was fighting to reclaim myself. Advice for women. As women, we often carry the weight of expectations, societies, our families, even our own. But in the process, we sometimes forget to listen to the voice inside us, the one that knows what we truly need. Don't lose yourself trying to be everything for everyone else. It's okay to pause, to reevaluate, and to choose a path that honors your truth. Happiness isn't selfish, it's necessary.